Okay, perfect. Um, I have company with me. Um, well, hi everyone, and I'm so glad I caught David's talk as well. I wish I could be there with you, but family obligations made it difficult for me to make it. So I'm glad to still be joining you online. Let me try to share my presentation so you can see. Uh, Before I do that, so that it doesn't get confusing, so I'm a consultant. I worked a lot with UN organizations. So my presentation today will be sharing um, my perspective from gained experience. Je vais pas que les gens te voient. Mais tu peux rester me suivre. Mais j'ai besoin que tu sois calme, d'accord? Will you let me know if you're able to see the presentation?
We see it fine, thanks.
Perfect. Okay. And so I've worked a lot. I run a company, a small company, consulting company called the Luminous Agency, where we work on empowering people to adopt technology. So I've worked a lot with multilateral organizations, as the intro mentioned, in education, peace and security. I had a career in the extractive industries as well in Central and East and West Africa, actually. And but the past decade, my focus has really been on digital health. Excuse me, my child is with me. This is why I wasn't able to attend, and is very much likes to be involved in my speaking. Je dois parler, s'il te plaît. Elle est l'organisatrice et les autres messieurs sont les participants aussi. D'accord? Ok, merci. And so what I'm going to share is just what the experience that what I've learned from the experience again over the years, and give you a bit of a sense of where things are at the multilateral organization space. So yes, about me as I started speaking, s'il te plaît, j'ai vraiment besoin que tu restes calme. Merci. I lecture at currently at Harvard Medical School, but I've built several courses for the World Health Organization. I designed the first course that we use to train ministries of health about what digital health actually is. For a while, there wasn't anything comprehensive that elucidated that for them. And that course has been adopted by ITU and the WHO, and has been taken up beyond just Africa. Africa is where we started the course. I've done several, as I mentioned, designing technology-based solutions and then deploying them as well. I'm so sorry. Excuse me, guys. J'ai vraiment besoin que tu me laisses faire ça, d'accord? Oh, j'ai très envie. And just in terms of beyond designing and deploying technology, I've also done a lot in policy development, and really in the global health space, there are very few policies that addressed regulated the work that we were doing. So those of us who are designing and deploying solutions had a lot of power in terms of how countries ended up designing their policies, especially not just around technology development, but also around data sharing. And so that opened up a space for me to go into policy development, making it actually part of my work. And again, as I said, in terms of collaborations, I've done a lot of work with UN organizations, NGOs, CSOs, and private sector partners as well. And in recent years, the focus has been working with government in order to ensure that they're putting guardrails. My sincere apologies for all of this, but this is the life of a parent these days, trying to work and do this at the same time. Um, so in terms of, yeah, the presentation, I wanted just to share sort of where things are right now around data sharing, what's been done, what has worked, where the challenges still remain, and then some ideas that we've been discussing around how we get to a better place in order to address a little bit of the issues that Davey spoke about. I think that's, of course, beyond my work. And so I just want to highlight I'm really going to focus on sort of the multilateral perspective, not necessarily digging into the EU itself, although what happens in the EU has been extremely influential in the trends around the world. We often look to the investments made in the EU in order to determine what we can do outside as well. So and so one of as a multilateral organizations working in global health, WHO specifically, what we've been bracing for the past decade or so has been how to manage the fact that, which is a good thing, but also something that brings some challenges, the increase in life expectancy and the fact that there will be a larger aging population by 2050. We've benefited from the innovations in technology and medicine. However, it's also brought about unforeseen and on challenges we weren't necessarily prepared for, especially in low and middle income countries. And then, there aren't a shortage of issues, including the health space itself. David's comment at the end around the American diet, I know we weren't speaking about people at the time, but we're seeing the effect of changes in diet and access in foods that aren't necessarily best for us. And then, of course, the disparities as the populations grow, the disparities around health and access and the quality as well. And so, we understand that, the map here just shows where the majority of aging populations would be. So those are where the challenges are. Most of the countries that actually really depend on multilateral guidance frameworks are dealing with the younger population side. So you see sort of the distribution there and where focus needs to be in terms of preparing for the implications of the change in demographics. And then, of course, there are economic pressures in healthcare. As technology improves, as there are more increases, we see the cost of care isn't decreasing, and so that's something we have to prepare for. And then the tendency with innovation is to experiment, which is great. We discover a lot. But what happens is that some of the tools, especially in the digital health space, some of the tools have not been. Je vais te donner après. Laisse faire ça et puis après je fais tout ce que tu veux. Excuse me again, where these solutions aren't necessarily being scaled, and so and some of them are deployed in places where governments or individuals aren't necessarily ready to sustain them. So there's a sustainability issue that we're so bracing for. What we all agree on are the possibilities that advances in technology, AI especially, and the better we become about sharing data and ensuring that there's access, there are benefits to health systems, even though it comes at costs that we're trying to address. So these multilateral organizations that I've worked with, be it WHO, UNICEF, Global Health, or the International Telecommunication Union, we're all in agreement, in alignment in the possibilities that are there. How we get to we get to leverage these possibilities. That changes depending on the organization, as well as some of the challenges that multilateral organizations are focusing on changes as well. So just, coming into very specifically in the data sharing space, just a reminder, so WHO and other multilateral organizations have to consider all of their member states. WHO specifically has 194 member states. I've worked in the Africa region in Latin America for the Pan American Health Organization, as well as the Middle East and Asia. So I have a sense of what these various regions are dealing with and the diversities that exist within the regions themselves and across. And so there, the challenge is massive. I've selected some of what these regions have in common in terms of challenges when it comes to data sharing itself. Currently, much of the data infrastructure for health in the public sector are built on years of digital health projects, most of which were pilot projects, most of which were not sustained, and they weren't necessarily deployed in a systematic way. Over time, we've gotten better as a digital health community in how we deploy projects. So currently, while some countries have advanced data infrastructure, others, there are still cases where data is stored in people's computer in some parts of the world, individual computers, and entire data sets disappear when a person leaves a job at the ministry. Researchers aren't able to access them. So even within the countries, there's still challenges when it comes to streamlining data sharing approaches. And then, of course, there are privacy concerns. This is a global issue. I think high income and LMICs have this in common, although for different reasons, depending on which side of the world one finds themselves in. Security concerns are the same, again, in varying degrees, where some places have done well in ensuring cybersecurity measures. Other places, this is not even, cybersecurity measures aren't even yet a consideration, at least not in the public health sector. And then there are, a diverse world, so different standards. EU has paved the way in how to approach this. North American countries as well and China have demonstrated how this is done. But in places where we're dealing with a variety of legal structures, a variety of income levels and economic abilities, technical capabilities, it's been a complicated issue. And then, of course, technological gaps where even though technology exists, its access is not equally distributed. And so while some standards might be set to really manage a particular type of technology, others are still trying to figure out how to get data from computers into servers. Countries are fighting, moving aggregated national health data to the cloud. So there's still or those who might be interested, countries like Mali or Niger aren't able to do it for various reasons. So those have all made data sharing extremely challenging, at least in the public health sector. We've had some minor successes when we figured out, at least momentarily, how to do it, and WHO leveraging its, sorry, excuse me, just. Thank you all so much for your patience. I think, DJ, next time I'll just do everything I can to come, even if I have to bring my child with me so she can be in the room. But yeah, so where we figured out, even momentarily, how to share data or how to allow for viewing of data across borders. We've had some success. COVID was an example where there was sort of minimal information, which was that could be verified no matter where we were when we were traveling. The WHO itself maintained a database of very broad data, so just around the number of cases, confirmed testing, vaccines, etc. So not necessarily granular data where we went down to the individuals, but the sort of usual high-level data that it receives from member states who were willing to and had a mechanism to submit their data during COVID. That effort hasn't continued as well as it could have. And then for a while, I think it's probably going, I think it started around mid 2010s, around 2014, 2015. There was an established global dementia observatory that is still ongoing, and entire countries don't necessarily submit. It's more institutions that submit their data to WHO, and a version of it is available, available shared. It can be accessed for research, etc. And then I've mentioned just a wave of mobile solutions, digital solutions that have been put in place all over the world, and those often there are mini data sharing agreements that take place. Excuse me. The mini agreements that take place, they're often really, I call them this, it's like not necessarily enforceable. It's very much, I work at a ministry in a country, and a partner wants to deploy something, and we agree on how we want to manage data for the sake of that specific project. So there's a lot of work to do there, but there have been agreements in place. In my own experience, an example was doing the Ebola emergency response, for example, where we needed to, the countries where there were cases in West Africa, Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone were very different in different places in terms of the additional maturity, in terms of their lab capacity. So for Guinea, we needed to send samples to France, which was then to Senegal, I'm sorry, and that data was managed by an institution, a French institution. So there was some type of an agreement in terms of how that data is going to be shared as it's being crossed, as it's crossing borders. And then surveillance data was shared with partners such as CDC and various funders who came into place. So and then once the emergency itself is declared over, the agreement no longer stands. So we're still there. The International Telecommunication Union has been a big player, especially in the digital health space. In LMICs, they're often collaborating with WHO. So all of the projects I've done, be it immunization, surveillance, or policy development, it's been in collaboration with the ITU, working with ministries of health and connecting them to ministries of ICT to ensure that the technology and aspect is advancing in the way that it needs to in order for these priority health programs and policies to be deployed. So, in terms of, as I was looking around and speaking to colleagues, I did find, I knew of some of these initiatives, but I did find some other ones that I wanted to share. So it's been since 2020, WHO has centered the idea of ensuring that the SDG 3, which is health for ensuring healthy lives and well-being for all people, included specific efforts that really included an aging population. I work primarily with in my work, it's often youth or sexual and reproductive health, which is people are still sort of doing, planning for family planning. And so I wasn't aware of some of these other initiatives, but I found that there are some initiatives, especially in the NCD space. We do have often a specific attention being paid to aging population, but it's not always the case in other programs. So it was good to to find that out. And then the issue of the use of technology and the differences in levels of comfort has definitely come up. And so some special attention is being paid to ensuring that all populations are clear and understand their rights, are given access and are considered as we're developing technologies. In terms of data sharing, I didn't find much around data sharing. Other than the sort of broader data sharing, not in the way that there is some specificity when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, for example, or immunization emergency. So I didn't find anything. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I'll keep looking and share with Didier as something comes up. So these are some of the documents and guidelines that the World Health Organization has out there to facilitate, encourage responsible data sharing. The governance principle, this image is from a World Bank document that's been quite influential in the global health space. Many nonprofit organizations, CSOs look to that when it comes to health data. As you can see, it's, protecting people is one that we still quite haven't figured out, how to do. And prioritizing equity when we're dealing with innovations, how do you ensure that all of these components are equally cared for? Has been quite a challenge. I also have an image on a WHO data collection site. So it collects different types of data. What you have here are reports. Depending on the program, the granularity of the data varies. So some could be, for an economic, assessment or type research, you'll be able to find what you need. But if we're looking into, detailed data sets to feed, to train AI on, you may not always find it here, but again, it's worth having a look. Every year there's a World Health statistics, but again, it's high level. However, it gives a sense of sort of where the countries are, because you can see what information has been submitted, and that sort of tells you which countries have repositories that could be useful for different types of research. Of course, negotiations will need to happen directly with them. I also wanted to share some additional guidance documents for those who aren't unaware that they existed. For a while, WHO has had an ethical data sharing guideline that since it's digital health, or we were speaking about e-health or mobile m-health days, that's existed. In 2020, I was part of an advisory, WHO, I think it was 2018, 2019, launched a digital health and innovation department. Before that, everything technologies was divided around within the organization. So there wasn't a single department kind of taking care of it. And it was really important, as we agree that technology is going to be part of how we address health issues. It was important to have a department to steward this. And so this department was launched. I was part of an advisory, I co-chaired the inaugural technical advisory group on digital health and innovation. And one of the work that we were able to support was this development, the global strategy on digital health. It was supposed to be completed by 2025, but I believe it's been officially extended. And so it breaks down ideas around how member states can integrate, develop, and sort of steward the inclusion of technology in their health space. It has some mention of data, but not all. I spent last year reviewing I review all of Africa's digital health, national digital health strategies, some of Latin America, some of Asia, but very few actually mention one, AI, obviously, because a lot of them were developed before AI became as prevalent as it has in the public health and global health space. But data sharing is not mentioned in very many, even the ones that were developed as late as 2021, 2022, when we were already thinking about, during COVID, we were really thinking about issues around data sharing. And then in 2021, there was an advisory committee as well that on AI for health for the WHO, and they developed a guidance document that's available as well for those who are interested. Overall, when it comes to data sharing, these are the stated wishes and agreements with the WHO. The intent is to ensure that there's enough data to accelerate research, to enhance collaboration, and there's a group that focuses on health data collaborative. Again, the granularity of data that can be accessed as a member of the collaborative really varies based on the country. But the effort is there where different organizations, different member states have come together and said, we want to look at this as a collective. And then the position itself is that no matter what happens, we need to ensure that WHO's position has been, no matter what happens, we need to ensure that data is being shared ethically and responsibly. So the vision for the future for myself, other multilateral organizations, NGOs, those of us especially working in LMICs, we see that there is a lot of data that has been collected. The example for Africa of all the hundreds of digital health projects that have gone on, surveillance project, emergency response projects, about 80% of that data is housed outside of the continent with no established mechanism for countries to access it. And so the excuse or the reason often given is that there isn't an integrated system even at national levels, let alone at international levels, to be able to facilitate that exchange of data and to share sort of research results. And so it would be fantastic if the collaborative, the various collaborations around data sharing that I've mentioned could get to this point. And of course, although AI is really being discussed everywhere, especially generative AI, in much of the world, it is still its access and its use and is still quite very, very early stages if being used at all. Much of what's being called AI, you spend time that I'm sure you've discussed this, isn't really AI. So we'd like to see increased use of actual AI technologies, especially in places where it's needed most. And then because ethics and governance is an issue, really seeing more investments being made towards establishing that, not just in the way that it's being done, where we say, okay, the EU has established XYZ, let's adopt it and basically fill in the blanks or like interchange country names, etc. And so what's happened is that many countries or regions have ended up with policies, frameworks that don't necessarily apply to their situation. And so the specificity is critical, and I'd love to see more of that happening. And just some ideas on how to get there. Being part of digital health for about 14 years, the digital health community, we talk a lot about interoperability, and many technologies are developed for different reasons, but not necessarily considering how it interfaces with other existing technology or how it may interface with future technologies. And so we do have a lot of sort of closed systems in place, and that contributes to the fragmentation of data, which makes data sharing complicated and sort of in some ways can decrease the value of what we already have. And so to see more efforts going towards that would be useful. There's been a lot of progress made in the digital health space over I think since like 2020, 2018, and now I'm seeing more and more of that. So just a lot of work going on there. We do need standards in order to facilitate our data sharing. There are existing technology development standards, but not all of them are applicable to every country. And so to continue to sort of enhance those efforts would be extremely useful. And getting policies that make sense, they don't have to be exactly the same. We live in a diverse world, but to sort of think about, consider the fact that data is crossing borders more than people are. And so what do we actually need to, acknowledge the reality, and what do we need to do to make sure that we're not behaving as if that's not happening or as if it's going to stop, but that we acknowledge that this is where our world is, and what can we do about it. And then, of course, building capacity just around, there is still a lot of knowledge gaps around even what data is, to be honest, but also around why it's valuable. If you're working in research, if you're training AI systems, you're very clear on why this is valuable. If one works a lot on data-driven decision making, it's very clear. But most public health systems that we see in global health, that is still not very clear. We're talking about the importance of data, but our behavior and our strategies and our decisions are being made without considering that data. So that's something I'm tackling, for example, with my Aspen Institute fellowship is how to build capacity around the use of data in decision making for policymakers and decision makers around the world. And then just engaging communities. Again, I'm pretty sure conversations around fear of, privacy with increased data sharing has come up. I would be surprised if it hasn't. And when I've worked mostly in Africa with countries on developing national AI strategies or national AI frameworks, and we consider everything except for how do we now translate this to our citizens? How do we ensure that the people whose data we claim we're trying to protect understand all that we're doing? And they're just provisions for that are still not being made. And so, the more we leave people out in the dark around the issues on data privacy or why it's important to share this data, the less they're willing to buy in, and the more we continue to sort of slow down progress. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Again, thank you so much for your patience as my child joined the talk at the beginning, and I'll stick around if there are any questions. I know that we're running a bit behind on time, so I'm here. Over to you in the room.
To questions.
Oh, thank you, David. Or comments, I'll take in, love to hear some thoughts as well. I mean, I remember I came in during David's talk, which was, sort of very high advanced in a different direction than mine. So any clarifications or comments on where things are, I'd be more than happy to.
Sorry, we had a problem with the audio on our side. Didier was asking a question, but I don't think you heard it.
Oh, no, I didn't hear it.
So Didier's going to ask it again now. He's come over to a different computer.
Yeah, hello, Huguette. Thank you. I have one question and one comment. My question is about the ITU patients, to uniformize health, to uniformize health, how can I say that? Health rules or health data. I didn't know about this. I saw that they are busy since 20 years. It's been a while. I saw that it's also, there is something going on with the WHO since 2012. So it's been also a while. So can you say, let's say, I suppose, I hope that they are in contact also with the European level, because if there is one thing that's really a problem, it's called interoperability, and for this, you know, you need also. So just it's kind of a practical question. Do you know people, or do you know a group in the WHO following specifically this? That's my question. And my comment is more about the decade of healthy aging. So first, coming back to, thank you, David, to remind us that Eurosymposium on healthy aging is maybe not the best word. Could be Eurosymposium on healthy longevity. But I would say that about 60 to 70% of the information that I read about the decade of healthy aging is about ageism, like if the fact that we age was caused for almost 90% because of the way other people look at old people. You know, I'm convinced that the way people look at old people has some influence, but I'm also convinced that even if you look to very old people with a lot of love and goodwill and so on, they are still going to die with not a big difference. So yeah, that's the comment.
Thank you, Didier. I would love to speak to your comment first. And so when I was preparing my presentation, I wanted to use longevity. I think I mentioned when we spoke, you know, that I have some interest in that. I lost my mother at 60, she was 64. And so at her passing is when I started to think more about health systems and how it's about sort of disease management and not, you know, healthy life. And I use healthy aging because that's the UN, you know, terminology currently, and I really do hope that the term longevity would be used more in this space, because I think it has a different it forces us to really think carefully about how we approach the delivery and management of health systems, because the objective is to ensure that people have, you know, healthy lives, so as long as, you know, as long as possible. And I know how you know, you mentioned your comment about like how we deal with aging populations and people's regard towards them. You know, being a parent, I remember while going through a pregnancy, any issue I face, I was told, oh, it's because you're pregnant. So I can only understand, you know, someone's being told every issue they face is because they're aging. And I discovered there were some issues that I had that were not linked to the pregnancy itself, but it was something else. But no one looked deeper, because they were like, oh, you're pregnant, so this is, you know, causing that as well. So I had to really advocate for, you know, for my own health, for, you know, to have things being, so I can not relate, you know, in terms of age, but I can relate in terms of being part of a population where people decide that because this is happening, you're at this stage of your life, you'll see, you know, any issue that you face is connected to that, and we don't necessarily bother to look a bit deeper. So I do hope to see that changing. And then in terms of the work with ITU, so I connected to ITU when I was working in the extractive industry, and I needed to, we were trying to, you know, bring connectivity to communities in areas where there was like a forest before. And they're really underutilized, I would say. Much of what we're trying to do around technology, they've been thinking about for a long time, and they have a wonderful team. I do know specific people on who work there, especially on the health side. They do have a wonderful team. They're very action oriented, and a lot of the propagation of digital health and what we know is connected to this the close collaboration that's been taking place since 2012. Documents that have been developed in connection with WHO. I know that for much of the world, I didn't look specifically for the EU, although I'll be surprised if that's not the case, because I know that We do have an AI working group that the ITU hosts, and there are colleagues from around Europe, researchers who join. Though longevity is actually not an issue, it's not one of the topics that's often addressed. So I would encourage, integration of people who are working in this specific space into that group. So there's a big representation from the EU itself, often from research and academic institutions, not necessarily in the way that governments, in the way that you find for other parts of the world. But yeah, that group has been happening, and again, it's very action oriented. They do keep up with the trends, having the footprint in the telecommunication space, where there is a need, ITU is incredible in moving the agenda forward and really getting member states together. And so I would I can share resources with you, Didier, and then you can share with the wider community after. But I certainly encourage people to look into their work, their events, their various working groups, especially if you're interested in a very action-oriented approach. And their collaboration with WHO has done wonders for the digital health space.
Yeah. Okay, if you have time for one more very quick question and one quick answer. When you've seen the health systems around the world, you've seen how they're dealing with health data. Can you point to one or two places where you think they're doing a particularly good job and others should learn from them?
It's hard to put, it's hard to very extent. I think in Africa, we do have an example, because it is South Africa, because of the massive public health system, is in terms of policies, regulations. So they've sort of thought about the continuum of health data I mean, it's not perfect, but if you want to see, people have thought about the continuum. South Africa will be one. Rwanda is another country. It's smaller, so it's a bit easier, to manage. But there is a great approach. And I'm looking at we always want to say the US or Canada, the privacy is health in terms of health data is also advanced. But I'm looking at in Latin America, places like Brazil, for example, where they've got a massive and a diverse population, how they've integrated their data systems with the insurance schemes, for example, would be a fantastic way. And another place where I've had personal experience that's also worth looking at are Indonesia and Malaysia. Those are some, and of course Australia. Australia it's faced the issue head on and has done a lot of work around that. But those are some of the examples that I can think of right now, where again, nothing is perfect, but they've done bits of it well enough that you can get a sense of what's good.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
So I'll hand the mic back to Sven, who's chairing this session.
Okay, any more questions? Any online question? No? Okay, so thank you very much for your lecture.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your understanding with my parenting duties. I appreciate it.
I was very impressed how calm you stayed.